Well, after talking about this stock for a while now, it has finally done what many would have said was impossible last year, and that would be to see Shift Technologies under $1. So in this video, I'm going to break down my thoughts about Shift's current share price, some caution flags to be aware of, and whether or not I'm still buying at current share prices. But with all of that said, let's go ahead and dive right in. So for those of you that have been in this stock for a while now, I think many of us did not expect this company to fall under $1 per share. But here we are. There are definitely some negative things that come from being under $1. But we need to keep in mind that share price doesn't always reflect a company's performance. For example, PayPal has fallen over 60%, Netflix has fallen over 65%, and Zoom has fallen over 65% as well. Now, does that mean these businesses are 60% worse? No, but based on current market conditions, there has been a major sell-off in everything except energy, utilities, and healthcare over the past 6 months. And so we can't simply just use price as a way to value a company. But one thing that I do find interesting is when we look at the used car sector, Shift is actually outperforming Vroom, CarLotz, and even Carvana. Now don't get me wrong, Shift has gotten absolutely destroyed, and the amount that these companies have dropped are relatively similar. But I believe there is something bigger that we need to pay attention to, and that is whether or not the online used car platforms can actually survive and become profitable. The reality is that if online used car businesses simply can't generate positive net income, then none of these are buys. Even a company like Carvana, who last year generated $12 billion in revenue. When we look at this sector, they have very small margins. So rather than focusing only on revenues, the most important metrics we need to look at are gross profits per unit and their path to profitability. For a company like Carvana that has been around for 10 years and is still struggling to produce consistent profitable quarters, the current strategy for many of these companies is simply not working. The reason why I believe this strategy doesn't work is because the main business for these companies is flipping depreciating assets. Unlike homes, you cannot add a lot of value to fixing cars and then reselling them on the market. With homes, you can add tens of thousands of dollars by doing many different things, from adding bedrooms, bathrooms, or renovating some of the major living spaces. With cars, you simply can't do this. So they need to buy cars undervalued, and then after repairs, they must still be able to sell at prices to generate profits while still supporting the rest of their operations. The truth is that even with enormous revenue numbers, it's not going to solve the issue. So when we look at these companies, the question becomes who is going to come out with a solution that will change the entire sector. Now, Shift does have some tools that I believe could do just that, but it is not something that will make them profitable in the next year or two. And this is why I truly believe that this is a company in a sector that should be a long-term hold if anyone is looking to buy into this company. Now, Shift does have a path to profitability, which is great, but here's what needs to happen. The company needs to sell 100,000 vehicles, and in 2022, they are projected to sell between 34,000 and 38,000 vehicles. The company would also have to generate $3 billion in revenue, and their adjusted GPU should be between $3,800 and $4,000. Now, Carvana had over $4,500 this past year, so it's definitely doable. However, I will say that Carvana did have some help because of the appreciation in vehicles in Q2 and Q3 of last year, and they are struggling to get back to $4,000 in GPU. So with the struggles from the #1 company in the space, how does Shift produce these numbers? And this is where I believe every used car company needs to focus. For Shift to get to their projected GPU goal, they need to improve their F&I, which is their financing and insurance. If Shift can get into a position where many of their customers use their platform as a one-stop shop to get a vehicle, loan, and insurance, they will be in a great position. But it is definitely easier said than done. The hardest part is including captive financing to their platform, but it will be the most rewarding segment when it becomes integrated with Shift. The problem is that adding this segment is very capital intensive, so the company would need to be in a position where they can implement captive financing while still having cash to purchase new vehicles. And that is why I believe Shift adding shares could be great news for us as shareholders. I was in a similar position with CleanSpark where they diluted shareholders and many people were upset. But they are now in a position where they could 5x their hash rate in a year. With all that said, the economy is not in the greatest position when it comes to dilution and raising capital. Shift will not want to dilute shareholders at these current share prices. But if it remains at these prices for the next year, we will probably have to see the company adding shares in order to survive. And speaking of survival, we also need to consider the kinds of cars that people will be buying during a possible recession. With many families currently living paycheck to paycheck, they won't be buying newer cars because they cost more. They're going to be looking for older vehicles that cost less. Over half the cars that are being sold are vehicles 6 to 10 years old, and half the cars Shift sells are 8 years or older. So not only are they in a great position to sell directly to consumers, but they are actually in a better position market-wise than Carvana, given the kind of vehicles that they sell. The good news is that not only does Shift normally sell cars in this age range, but they have added a lot more to their inventory in this past quarter. So it does look like they are prepared for this year. Now, as I said, financing and insurance is a sector-wide issue. So what is Shift going to be able to do to outperform their competitors? I know it is early, but with the new acquisition, they'll have a greater opportunity to introduce more cars to their platform, leading to more brand awareness. And I believe that this part of the business has to succeed for them if they want to dominate the space. Shift, unlike their competitors, is focused on growing stronger than faster. They want to focus on their current markets to build their brand, and then slowly work their way out. This is important, especially now, because it means that there are less expenses that have to be paid for Shift in comparison to Vroom and Carvana. But they are currently in 3 of the most populated regions in the US. Using their current method, they won't need to advertise as much, which leads to the last piece of their path to profitability, which is to reduce their customer acquisition costs, or CAC, to around $1,000. But even though there is a path to profitability, we need to look at some of the caution flags to pay attention to. As I said before, this is not only a Shift issue, but the whole used car sector needs to figure these things out. The biggest argument that I think many people acknowledge is the amount of quarterly cash burn. And this is a real problem for Shift. And even though they have more cash than they do their entire market cap with almost $108 million, they could be out of cash in the next 2 to 3 quarters. And that's assuming that they don't raise any more capital or fix their profits. This is a major warning sign. Now, they did say the cash use is expected to be significantly reduced for the coming quarters as they convert the high point of inventory achieved in Q1 into sales and cash, and their annual and non-recurring payments are behind them. But they cannot continue to burn this amount of cash over the next year, or they will be in big trouble. And this brings up another caution flag, which is the amount of hiring they have done this quarter and last quarter. Now, being able to hire quality personnel has become a whole lot more expensive in the past year, and simply just trying to hire workers has become extremely difficult for many companies. But there are 3 worries that could come out of this. One is the inability to hire enough staff to sell more cars and expand further into the US. The second is that there is a fear of increasing the number of people on their staff because their expenses would continue to go up. Third, with many large tech companies having to dismiss a portion of their workers, we could start to see this move into other sectors as well. Now, from my perspective, it wouldn't make sense to me for them to hire as much as they are if they fear running out of cash. So I'm confident in their strategy, but it's still a concern to pay attention to. But after looking at this past earnings report, they have continued to outperform on their revenue and GPU. And so I don't think there's much to worry about from that perspective. I honestly believe that it all comes down to their expenses and having enough cash to support the expected revenues they are projecting. This upcoming quarterly report is probably going to be the most important one in the company's history. There are 3 things that I'm going to be looking for. First is making sure that they continue to meet their expectations in revenue, but most importantly GPU, and how much of a role finance and insurance played for that quarter. Secondly, we have to see a significant reduction in cash use like the management team talked about. I'm looking for the cash use to be somewhere around $65 million. They have already added a good amount to their inventory for this busy season, so they should be able to reduce cash use by about $25 million. Third, I want to get more clarity on their fair acquisition. With all the used car companies struggling, Shift needs to prove how they will outlast the other competitors. And I think the fair acquisition could play a significant role in this. Okay, so I know that was a lot, but I think it is important to address all these things before I share what I'm planning on doing. I will only be adding a small amount here and there. This is not one of the largest positions for me. And with the given risk, I do not want to make this a top 3 position, but I will be more focused on adding to positions that aren't built out yet, like The Honest Company and my newest company, carparts.com, which if you haven't heard of this company before, I made a video talking about them recently, and I really like what I see. But hey, if you enjoyed the transparency, hit that like button down below. That really helps this channel in a massive way. And I would love to hear your thoughts about Shift's current share price. So feel free to mention your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell. That way you're notified when new content comes out. Hope you all enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll see you in the next one.